Hi there. Do you know what the present perfect continuous tense is?
Not really. Can you explain it to me?
Of course. It's a tense in English that we use to describe an action that started in the past and is still ongoing. For example, I have been studying for 4 hours is in the present perfect continuous tense.
Ah, I see. So it's different from the present perfect and present continuous tenses?
Yes, it is. The present perfect tense is used to describe an action that was completed in the past and has a connection to the present. The present continuous tense is used to describe an action that is happening right now.
Okay, I think I'm starting to understand. Can you give me some more examples of the present perfect continuous tense?
Sure. Here are some examples. I have been working on this project all week. She has been practicing her piano skills for hours. They have been learning English for 6 months.
Oh, I think I get it now. So it's used to describe an action that started in the past, is still going on now, and may continue in the future?
Exactly. It's often used to describe ongoing actions or situations that have been happening for a period of time and are still happening now.
Got it. And how do we form the present perfect continuous tense?
We form it with the auxiliary verb, have, or has, followed by the present participle, ing, form of the main verb. For example, I have been studying, or he has been working.
Okay, I think I understand. Can you give me an example of a negative sentence in the present perfect continuous tense?
Sure, here's an example. I haven't been studying all day.
And how about an interrogative sentence?
Here's an example. Have you been studying for long?
Thanks for explaining this to me. It seems like the present perfect continuous tense can be really useful in describing ongoing actions or situations.
Yes, it definitely can be. And remember, it's important to use the correct tense in English to make sure we communicate our ideas clearly.
Absolutely. Thanks again for the explanation.
No problem, happy to help. Hey, do you know how to use the present perfect continuous tense in English?
Not really. Can you explain it to me?
Sure. We use the present perfect continuous tense to talk about an action that started in the past and is still ongoing now or has just recently stopped. For example, I have been studying for 4 hours. Means that I started studying 4 hours ago, and I'm still studying now.
Okay, I think I get it. But when do we use this tense instead of the present perfect or the present continuous tenses?
That's a good question. We use the present perfect continuous tense when we want to emphasize the duration of an action that started in the past and is still going on now. The present perfect tense, on the other hand, emphasizes the completion of an action that has a connection to the present, while the present continuous tense emphasizes an action that is happening right now.
I see, so the present perfect continuous tense is for ongoing actions, while the present perfect and present continuous tenses are for different purposes.
Exactly. And the formation of the present perfect continuous tense is quite simple. We use the auxiliary verb, have, or has, depending on the subject, followed by the present participle form of the main verb with ing. For example, I have been studying, or he has been working.
Okay, got it. And what about negative and interrogative sentences?
For negative sentences, we simply add not, after, have, or has. For example, I haven't been studying for very long. For interrogative sentences, we switch the subject and the auxiliary verb, have, or has. For example, have you been studying for long?
Great, that's helpful to know. So how can we use the present perfect continuous tense in everyday conversation?
There are many situations where we can use it. For example, if someone asks, "What have you been doing today?" You can say, "I have been working on a project all day." Or, if someone asks, "How long have you been learning English?" You can say, "I have been learning English for 6 months."
Okay, that makes sense. And what are some common mistakes to avoid when using this tense?
One common mistake is forgetting to use the auxiliary verb, have, or has. Another is using the past participle form of the verb instead of the present participle form. For example, saying, "I have been studied," instead of, "I have been studying."
Thanks for the tips. I'll be sure to keep those in mind.
No problem, happy to help. Remember, practice makes perfect, so try using the present perfect continuous tense in your conversations to get more comfortable with it.
Will do. Thanks again for the explanation.
Hey, do you remember how to form negative and interrogative sentences in the present perfect continuous tense?
Not really. Can you remind me?
Sure. For negative sentences, we simply add not after the auxiliary verb, have, or has. For example, I have not been studying for very long, or he has not been feeling well.
Okay, that seems easy enough. And what about interrogative sentences?
For interrogative sentences, we switch the subject and the auxiliary verb, have, or has. For example, have you not been feeling well? Or, has she not been studying for very long?
I see. But when do we use not? And when do we use no to make negative sentences?
That's a good question. We use not when we want to negate the auxiliary verb, have, or has, in the present perfect continuous tense. For example, I have not been studying, or she has not been working. We use no when we want to negate a noun or a pronoun. For example, there is no coffee left, or I have no time.
I think I understand now. So when we want to make a negative sentence with the present perfect continuous tense, we just add not after the auxiliary verb.
That's right. And for interrogative sentences, we switch the subject and the auxiliary verb. For example, have you been studying for very long? Or, has he been feeling well?
Okay, got it. And what about using contractions? Can we say, I haven't been studying, instead of, I have not been studying?
Yes, we can use contractions to make negative sentences in the present perfect continuous tense. For example, I haven't been studying is a common contraction for I have not been studying.
Great, that's helpful to know. And what are some common mistakes to avoid when forming negative and interrogative sentences in this tense?
One common mistake is forgetting to use not after the auxiliary verb. Another is forgetting to switch the subject and the auxiliary verb for interrogative sentences.
Okay, thanks for the heads up. I'll be sure to avoid those mistakes.
No problem, happy to help. Remember to practice using the present perfect continuous tense in negative and interrogative sentences to get more comfortable with it.
Will do. Thanks for the explanation.
Anytime. Hi there, have you been studying the present perfect continuous tense?
Yes, I have. I understand the basic usage and formation, but I'm still a bit confused about time expressions and tips.
Sure, I can help you with that. One common time expression used with the present perfect continuous tense is for plus duration, such as I have been studying for 2 hours. Another is since plus specific time, such as I have been studying since 9 a.m.
Okay, that's helpful. Are there any other time expressions I should know?
Yes, lately or recently can be used to indicate that the action has been ongoing in the recent past. For example, I have been feeling tired lately, or she has been exercising regularly recently.
I see. And what are some tips for using the tense correctly?
One tip is to remember that the present perfect continuous tense is used to describe an action that started in the past and is still ongoing. So, if the action has already ended, we should use the past simple tense instead. Another tip is to avoid using the tense for actions that are completed or habitual, as the present simple or past simple tense would be more appropriate.
Okay, got it. And what are some mistakes to avoid?
One common mistake is using the present perfect continuous tense with non-continuous verbs, such as have or own. Another mistake is using the tense to describe completed actions or actions that are not ongoing.
Thanks for the tips. I'll be sure to keep them in mind. Can you give me an example of a sentence that uses the present perfect continuous tense correctly with a time expression?
Sure. I have been learning Spanish for 3 months is an example of using for plus duration with the present perfect continuous tense.
Okay, that makes sense. And what about using the tense with negative or interrogative sentences?
The time expressions and tips are the same for negative and interrogative sentences. The only difference is that we add not after the auxiliary verb have or has for negative sentences, and we switch the subject and the auxiliary verb for interrogative sentences.
I see. Thanks for the clarification.
No problem. Remember to practice using time expressions and following the tips to use the present perfect continuous tense correctly.
Will do. Thanks for your help.
Anytime.